Hello, North America, Central Area. My name's David Card, and I am the Innovate Institute rep, and I'm super excited to be here with Matt Swenson and Michelle Burke. And they're going to be sharing with us some wonderful innovations that are happening at their institute. Let's start with Michelle. Just introduce yourself and one thing that's important happening in your life and in your family.
Michelle Burke. I teach at the Boise Nampa Institute, and I have a missionary in Guatemala, 2 boys at BYU, and a cute sophomore. That's 4 things, plus a nephew living with us this year. So it's all about family. We got a lot going on.
That's so great. And Matt?
My name is Matt Swenson. I'm obviously up here in Boise, Idaho. I have 6 children. We just got one married earlier this year, and so we're learning to be parents to adults, which is a new thing. It's a very different thing, but yeah, we're enjoying that. It's been good.
Can't even imagine that day.
Yeah, it's weird.
It'll be tomorrow. Get ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. My oldest is 11 and my youngest turns 1 tomorrow.
Wow.
So we're at a different stage,
Yeah,
but
a little bit.
yeah, that's fun. So Matt, tell us a little bit about the Institute demographic where you and Michelle are located.
Yeah, sure. So it's called the Boise Nampa Institute, and we actually have 2 different campuses with a whole bunch of little satellite places as well. So the main institute is down at Boise State, with another kind of sub-main facility out in the Nampa area, about 20 miles away, where we generally have about 800 to 900 students as of right now. I think it's 897 or something like that as of yesterday's meeting. We have a goal of hitting 1,500 in this school year, so we're keep us on task there. We're going to get there. But demographic wise, it's kind of a smattering. We aren't a typical campus school institute. We have a lot of students, but even the students aren't typical students. Very few of them live on campus. Very few of them are down on campus all day long. During the day, it's difficult to have classes of more than 10 or 15. Most of our classes happen at night. And some of those classes are large classes, 120 plus kids in those evening classes. So a little bit non-traditional student, a lot of older students. The 25 plus group is a group that we focus a little bit more on than maybe is typical around the area. So, but good people, good young adults here, just maybe not as traditional as the typical institute might see.
That's good to know. So what are your roles at the Institute, Matt and Michelle?
I'll start. We're also innovating in a little bit different way. We're split assignments right now outside into the seminaries as well. I teach 2 classes in a seminary building during the week, and then I am the choir director at the Institute. Cover these 2 podcasts, teach another music-related class, and then teaching the new Answer My Gospel Questions class. So kind of the ancillary guy covering all the odd things at the Institute right now.
That's great.
I also feel like the ancillary sister at the Institute, maybe. I teach classes. I run the student council. I help with this podcast, and then I run a monthly marriage class for our young adults that are young marrieds. I also answer every text and phone call for relationship questions for all of the young adults. So we just stay busy. There's lots to do.
Always. That's so great. So let's jump into the innovation. You both have been working so hard in so many different ways, but these podcasts have just been, we can learn a lot from what you're doing there. So tell us about the innovation and how it came to be.
I'll give a little history on that. So we started with our weekly devotional. We would hold Friday forums, and because we don't have the students on campus, we have over 10,000 young adults in our valley. They just don't all come down here to BSU. So because they're spread out, we would invite professionals to come here to speak on a weekly basis about how the gospel of Jesus Christ has blessed them personally and professionally. And they were fantastic speakers and amazing people in our valley. but the room would have 20, 25, 30 students on a good day. And we felt like, wow, we're not getting this great message out to everyone that wants it. So we started with Facebook Live so that we could be broadcasting for more to hear, and Zoom. We tried Zoom during the pandemic. And then it just got to where it was like, this just needs to be a podcast. If it was a podcast, anybody could listen anytime from anywhere, and it would just open up our audience so much. So that's where we first called to ask that permission to start. And so we started miking our speakers and then publishing their messages on the podcast. So it went from the devotional to seeing the reality of our audience, to recognizing our audience could be bigger if we could broadcast it better. And then we entered into the podcast of I Am In, where we now, instead of having the speakers come here, I now interview speakers that we publish this semester on the podcast.
Yeah.
And so the I Am In podcast, is it now just you and the speaker, or is there still an audience as you interview them? How does that work?
Just me and the speakers. So like Sunday in this office, I had 2 of our young adults who are new converts, and they shared their story of coming into the gospel. So it's just the 3 of us in the room. This summer, we did some FSY podcasts where I had some session directors in the room, some young adult counselors in the room, another podcast with the seminary and institute teachers, sharing their experiences at the first summer of FSY. So no, it's just me and the speakers now. And it's really fascinating to be able to sit down with such extraordinary people and hear their stories and hear how the Lord is blessing their life in all various situations. So no more audience. I miss the audience. I think people speak differently in front of an audience than they do one-on-one. And yet there's a lot of intimacy and tender moments when it's just one-on-one.
Yeah.
David, I might mention something, just since our area is going to see this, that those podcast episodes about FSY would be really good for anybody in the area to listen to. It would get the mindset of a session director. It would get the mindset of how to advertise this to the students. It would even be good for the students who are thinking about going out and acting on that, in that way. So anyway, I just think, since it's out there, and we're hoping that other people in the area are listening, the I Am In podcast, and then just look for session director FSY, or what was it? What were the 3, Michelle? Say them again.
FSY session director, FSY counselor, FSY seminary and institute teacher.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little plug for those 3, because I think they would be very valuable to anybody considering any of those things. So
yeah,
and I'll link those to the podcast that we're doing here so that they
Great.
can get.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
So Matt, tell us about the other podcast that you're doing.
So Michelle's podcast has been going since July. Well, it's probably earlier than this, but we have record of it from July of 2020 in some form or fashion. And the other one, the Come Follow Him podcast, is about 7 weeks old. We started it at the beginning of the school year as just a Come Follow Me supplement. I'm kind of the consistent host, and I travel around and meet with other seminary and institute teachers, mostly institute teachers, to just talk about what's relevant to the young people in the Come Follow Me block that week. It opens up every Sunday morning, and we have listeners at 6 o'clock Sunday morning every week. It's just helping them kind of see what's relevant to them. It's geared towards young adults, but we actually have kind of a smattering of listeners across the age groups, just because it addresses a Come Follow Me study, and that's an option for everybody. So it's not as focused in its listenership as Michelle's might be, focused directly at young adults. So.
But what's fun is that we have the variety of the 2 podcasts. So we are hitting different needs, different wants, and the numbers are fascinating too. Like, to go from 20 in the room to how many listeners we have now per month is fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun. And I'd also say it's helping bridge the distance between the seminaries and the institutes. We're advertising it in our seminaries as well as a way to get to know the institute teachers. We have some of the seminary teachers doing that, acting as co-hosts. And so we're hoping to help them get a little more comfortable with us at the institute, just by getting to know us and the way we speak and the way we would address things. So
That's incredible. Can you speak to us too, Matthew, about how the podcast is recorded and how you go about doing that so that you can reach so many.
Yeah, so we actually, over the course of the years, have purchased 2 sets of Rode mics. And Rode mics are, in fact, I have one right here.
I was going to say, I just looked at my bag to see if I had one. I had one last night.
Rode mics are actually really cool. They're just little kind of self-encapsulated microphones that I turn on, and as soon as it's turned on, it's recording. When I turn it off, it stops recording. There's really nothing to managing them, and then you plug it into your computer and it opens up in its own program where you download the audio file. So the recording component is very simple if you have something like that. You could do it with your iPhone. I've forgotten my mics before and just recorded the room with my iPhone. iPhones are pretty good. And then there's a little bit of a process to get it uploaded. I use a service called Red Circle, which is a hosting site. You need to have a hosting site in order for Apple Music or Amazon or wherever you're sending it to pull it from. And so Red Circle is what I use. It's fairly straightforward, very simple. We just upload the audio file. There's a little bit of editing that happens, actually sometimes quite a lot of editing that happens. And I use some pretty hefty software for that because I know how, but freeware like Audacity would be plenty for anyone wanting to try to do this. And it just a clip and cut kind of a thing. I don't want that 10 seconds worth of the audio in there. So I just clip it out and match it. And, you can do it fairly simply.
Like when I tell him that I had a sneeze in my podcast on Sunday, that I have to go back and tell him exactly where the sneeze is. And it was after I said to the speakers, don't touch the table and don't touch the mic. I gave him this whole spiel. And then in the middle, I'm the one that Matt's going to have to go in and edit out.
But there's also some simple ways to find those places. If there's something that you're talking about that you don't want to talk about, just clapping 3 times shows you in the visual on the when you're editing that's a section you want to go in and review. So there's some simplified ways to do that. Mastering can be a hefty process, so it sounds really great coming through the audio devices, but there's free versions of mastering softwares like eAudio is a great freeware that you can do up to, I think it's up to 40 minutes worth of audio there. I have an account there because my podcast tends to be a little longer than that. So I think for maybe $50, you maybe get into the hosting service and the mastering service if you needed to. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm working kind of on the side on a Canvas course that we could just roll out to people that are interested in it, that would help them learn how to master and how to edit and things like that. So if anyone's interested in that, I'll have that done, and feel free to reach out.
That would be.
And when he says he'll have it done, he will, because Matt's the master of all other little projects, and he does a great job at every little thing he does, and he always has his hand in like 1,000 things that he's doing all at the same time.
Thanks, Michelle.
So great. Well, thank you both. I'm excited to hear also the impact that this is having. What are you noticing? And I hope we jump into the numbers, but I also hope we jump into like the converting experiences. How is it touching and strengthening individuals in their testimonies? So I hear.
I had an interesting conversation last week. A mother who used to live here near us moved to Ohio, and she has a son institute age, and they were driving along in the car, and she had called me about something else, had a question, and he stopped her. He goes, "Wait, is that the Michelle Burke on the podcast?" And she's like, yes, that's her. And I said, "Are you guys listening to the podcast?" She goes, "We don't have institute where we are. We're too far from it. So this is what we listen to when I'm driving him to work." So even that we have a platform where he can listen to a devotional speaker, someone testifying of how the Savior has blessed their life and continues to bless their life. And that's all he gets, because he doesn't have a location close enough to make it a regular thing for him. That was so awesome to hear. So we have students who all the time in class bring up, "Oh, when I was listening this week to Brother so-and-so, or when, Brother Edward spoke at this summer's devotional," there's always something that comes up as just a comment. And that's awesome, because then it's being heard and used, and they're reflecting on it as other things are taught.
I actually had a student in my seminary class earlier in this week bring up something that I had said in a podcast episode that I hadn't said in class that they thought was wonderful, that they wanted to make sure everybody heard. So it's kind of fun to see your own students remembering things that they had learned about the scriptures or about life that they want to make sure everybody else hears too. So it's kind of cool. Let me jump into some numbers if that's okay. Again, the I Am In podcast has been rolling for a couple of years. We have about 112 weekly listeners to that episode, to that podcast, not necessarily to the new episode, but to the podcast. Over the course of this month, for example, there have been 500 downloads in the last 30 days of something on that podcast, whether it's the last 4 episodes or people just found the podcast and they started at episode 1. It's a little more difficult to identify that, but I can tell you, for example, the very first episode we have posted, 4 people have listened to in the last 30 days. So that means 4 people probably went back to the beginning and started or just found it in the last 30 days. So that's a general look at it. It's difficult to identify how many individual listeners we have because it's possible that someone's listening to more than one episode or binge listening. But that number is pretty standard. About 105 to 115 weekly downloads is kind of the norm there.
And our age demographic.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so 98% of the listenership to this podcast, the I Am In podcast, is between the ages of 18 and 32. The analytics come up to 32. We can't break it down farther than that, but 14,000 people have listened. 14,708 people have listened. That's how many downloads since the beginning of the podcast, again, a couple of years ago.
And I would like to claim those as my students.
Yes.
Let's talk about how we claim those numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's actually a really interesting thing. And David, maybe we pause here to talk about that, because a podcasting is a different beast. It's not the sit them down in a classroom in front of you. And how is it being viewed by Salt Lake, by the Innovate team? I think for those of us that are interested in doing this, we want to make sure that our leaders are comfortable with it. So maybe help us get comfortable with it.
Absolutely. No, I've talked to Steve Miller, and he's over all of Innovate Institute for SNI. And they've been in a lot of meetings about podcasts and trying to figure out kind of where we go. And every time I talk to him, there is just absolute excitement and just wanting to research and learn and grow from these podcasts. And so I know he's spoken with you, Matt. I know we've tried to learn and grow from every podcast that is being done, but I feel enthusiasm from SNI administration about podcasts.
So speak to the area or institute director a little bit, who is wondering about FTE and how that looks and what they could be comfortable doing. I think that's an important component of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I wish I had clear answers on what FTE will look like or can look like with podcasts. But right now, what they've said is it really is just an additional opportunity to grow, and an institute director could decide whether or not he wants to allow that podcast to take up some of that FTE. But numbers wise, like you're saying, you can't say, okay, now Michelle has 14,000 students, right? That she has in her FTE. I know, that would be incredible. But the thing about podcasts too is that you record an episode and it's there and it's always there, and it can be repeated and it can be shared, and it can be so the accessibility of that is tremendous.
Well, and the library of that, because the first podcast I ever did was when the pandemic first started. I had a student who had his own missionary podcast. He was recording people's missionary experiences. And so he had me come to his studio to record 3 lessons because it was March and we didn't know how to teach. And so I still refer back to these 3 lessons from the Foundation of the Restoration that's on his podcast because they're there. So having that library as a teacher, I mean, I think it'd be so great to clip on a mic when you're teaching a course and your students know, hey, yeah, just go to the podcast and you can listen to last week's lesson that you missed. That would be phenomenal, right? For teachers and students, because everyone can make up work. Everyone can catch up from where they were at any time of the day, any day of the week. So the library option of what we're doing, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. I might just share my, I'm the one that edits and masters both of these podcasts, and our area director and institute director has given me half an FTE hour for each of those mastering and editing processes. And then to the recording component of the one that I record and host, I get 1 FTE. So I have 2 of my FTE hours counted, covering both podcasts. So maybe 1.5 would be considered for a full podcast. I don't know though, and it's probably, like you said, up to the area and the institute director to make that call. But that's just a reference point, maybe.
But I would suggest, because the podcast is as much work as a class, like to find someone to interview, to hold the interview, to edit the podcast, to get it published. And Matt and I have great communication, and we've been a great team. And we share a Google Drive where I upload my recordings from wherever I'm at home, or if I'm at the Institute building, and he's able to pull them down off of that shared drive and use them to then edit and produce and publish. So it's a lot. And it's awesome. It's worth it, but it is not just, oh, by the way, just tack that on to what you're doing. It's truly a whole nother class.
Yeah. And another component of podcasting is it's important to be consistent, or you lose the listeners that you had. And so if you say you're going to do something weekly and then you don't do it weekly, they just won't come back. They won't listen because there's nothing new for them. So it's important, once you start something, to continue to an end point at least, or at least to be consistent about what you're doing. And that is maybe the thing that's most challenging, is when your listeners are ready, but your recording person that is being interviewed isn't ready. It's harder to connect them in. So
Yeah.
So we try to stay a few weeks ahead.
Yeah.
That's great. That is great. And I think it helps institute directors and anyone who's trying to figure out if this can be doable for their institute. And I even say, if it's okay, that they could even call you and talk to you and ask you questions and see what's doable for their institute as well. So
yeah, for sure. I'm happy to field tech questions at any point. I ended up just getting a master's degree in educational technologies, and so pretty comfortable in most fields tech-wise in the educational realm. So David, can I share just the analytics of the other podcast really quick with you?
Please. Yes.
So again, the Come Follow Him podcast is about 7 weeks old. We have 147 weekly downloads, which is kind of exciting, because that's a bigger number than the I Am In podcast. There's something that's interesting though, and maybe we touched on it earlier, that because this podcast just follows the Come Follow Me block, it's really a valid and a good resource for anybody just researching Come Follow Me. And so we have a little bit different demographic, where we think 60% of our listener base is 18 to 30, where Michelle's is 98%. And so maybe we're about the same in how many young adults are listening, though our weekly downloads are more. We've currently reached 2,900 students or 2,900 listeners since the podcast began. And the most listened to, it's interesting, after conference, we had a drop off in listeners the week after. We've been seeing weekly increases of 30 to 40 people, but after conference it dropped off because everybody's just reviewing conference talks, and which is good. But we're growing again this week, and we're already up to 115 listeners since Sunday, which is 2 days ago. So it's a good. I don't know that there are other classes that have 400 or 500 people that have been blessed or benefited from the class that we teach in the seminary or institute building. But some of Michelle's early podcasts have that many people that have listened and been blessed by it. So, I think it's a wonderful resource to help instruct young adults about the Savior, about the gospel, whatever the topic you choose is. I think it's a unique and maybe woke way of getting to the young adults who just generally don't want to come down to the building anymore. At least in our area, it's becoming less and less of a thing. And so to take the Institute to where they are and the ways that they listen and the ways that they learn, I think is a really innovative way to approach what we do in Seminary Institute.
Well, and it's not even those that want to come anymore. There's a lot of young adults in our valley who have never come. We have young adults in our family stakes who are a little stuck after the pandemic, and they're anxious about even going to a YSA ward or even stepping foot into Institute. And this is a way in their own space, in their own comfort of their home, that they can get Institute and still feel the spirit of it and still feel inspirational messages without having to go anywhere. And that's awesome that a platform like this can provide that for those who aren't yet ready for the social or the big group setting and can still feel that. And even missionaries, there's times when I have sent the raw recordings to my missionary or others just to hear like, hey, you might want to be an FSY counselor. You should listen to what we just recorded this week. I know they can't click on the platform, but if it's an attached audio, they could. And, even that, just that you can shoot out into the world, anything is so awesome.
Agreed.
Totally. So, and we're already touching on this idea, but the purpose of Innovate Institute is to learn how to bless more young adults, how to help them become more converted. And it's all about the learning. So tell us about the inspiration you're receiving as you're moving forward with these podcasts and how to bless more young adults and with greater conversion.
Yeah, I might start there. The Come Follow Me, Come Follow Him podcast. It's actually been really wonderful for the faculty to sit and discuss. The brainchild kind of evolved from, as faculty members, we have some really great experiences in our office where we just sit down and we're like, hey, I'm teaching this. Can you give me your thoughts on this? I'm going to do it this way. I see this in the scriptures. What do you see? We have some really great conversations like that. And in an old GTL, it said, help your students have a similar experience to what you have in your office. And I thought, well, what a great experience to sit and listen to me and my institute director talk about what we see in the scriptures when that's relevant to the young people. And so I've been learning, and I think it's helpful for the staff as well to learn to see what ancient scripture has to say that's relevant to a 22-year-old, and make myself formulate those thoughts and articulate it beyond just what's relevant to us generally, what's relevant to them in the time of life that they're in. And I think that's creeping into our weekly lessons on other subjects, because I know the Come Follow Me block is about this, and I see a young person living in this world like that. We're able to speak to them a little more holistically about what scriptures talk about concerning them and their lives. It's been fun for me.
Well, and just to compliment Matt to say how cool he is, all summer, he gave each of us our dates. He organized all of the faculty at Institute, including our administrative assistants, and matched us up with our scripture block so that he used the summer to pre-record so that when fall came, he was just publishing. Yeah. And it was really fun. We knew our date, we knew our scripture block, we knew we had to be ready for a conversation with Matt. And, it got you on guard a little bit, especially those cute assistants. They were not very excited about that day. They
very
had read and they had looked things up, and it was fun to have that experience. So, you can include anybody in these moments and give them some preparation time, and it turns out fantastic.
We intend to include our students in that a little bit. The thought that we've had is that there's some enjoyment in listening to guys that study the scriptures all day long, every day for a living, in just what they see. The challenge in bringing a student in would be that they're going to look at it like a lesson that they're teaching on Sunday, and they want to have all this material ready to go, and they're nervous that it's not going to come out the way that they want it to. Whereas what we tend to do is just sit and discuss generally what's in the scriptures. It's really not even A to Z through the block. So our hope when we get students involved, which we're planning to do next semester, is occasionally to bring a student in to discuss just what they think about how we're speaking about the scriptures, or maybe what they find that's relevant there too. But but less of a, hey, you come prepared to teach. That's kind of what I do to the faculty, is say, you come prepared to teach me stuff and I'll come with nothing. And even though I come with something most of the time, I enjoy just sitting and asking questions and having it be a really frank and comfortable conversation with banter that just allows our brains to kind of go where they want to go. So it's teaching me and teaching us, I think, generally to talk more openly and to be open to letting the scriptures take us to relevant places without forcing it.
Mm. Love it. Normal and natural conversations
Yeah.
in the Word of God. That is just beautiful.
Yeah.
So what I love, what I'm learning, right, as you're moving forward and blessing more of these young adults, it's just fun because more inspiration's coming, right? Even as you were talking about, and we're going to get more young adults involved in doing this, it allows greater inspiration to keep coming as to how to continue to bless more and more these young adults. Because you're trying new things, you're innovating, and you're doing so as you seek the Lord's help and do it in inspired ways. So thank you. Any last words or of counsel of learning that you'd like to give our audience of the North America Central area?
I would just say, find so much gratitude in what the pandemic did for us for teaching. All the different platforms that allow us to reach students virtually right where they are, instead of encouraging that they have to be where we are. They don't have to come to us anymore. We can go to them on Insta, Facebook, on podcasts, on so many platforms now. And the Lord, I think, when he kind of grounded the earth and said, everybody back to your homes for 1 year, have a timeout, we had to think differently. And we had to stop doing what we'd always been doing and start looking that there are so many other ways to do things better than we're doing them. And they saw that in the missionary effort as well. But for Institute, there's always a better way. There's always going to be room for improvement. There's always going to be new ways to reach. Never stop seeking revelation. Prophet said, you need more personal revelation these last days to get through it. And I think that pertains to Institute. You have to keep looking for new ways to reach the young adults where they are in their realm, so that you can help bring Christ to them in any form from any platform. And podcasts are making that happen, but they're just one. There's so many other ways, and there will be new ways next month, next year. So keep looking, keep trying. Don't stop with just what you know. There's always a better way.
Yeah. David, I would just piggyback on that. To tout the Innovate team, man, you guys, it's wonderful. What we suggest, you say, sure, let's try it. And I think that's something that maybe isn't well known out in the area, that if you're thinking of something, formulate it enough to present the idea and then present it. This isn't the only way for sure. But we've been told multiple times over the last few years that what we've done in the past won't be enough. And if all we're doing is trying to do more of what we've done in the past with more students, it's just not going to work. It's not going to be enough. And so growing, I think, our institutes and reversing the trend of declining enrollments isn't going to happen by more of what we used to do, or doing it harder or louder. It will be done by innovating and by seeing new ways to speak to the young people who learn differently now. Maybe because of the pandemic, but because of their generations and the technologies that they have. If we're not using those things on their behalf, we're missing the way that they want to learn. And I think it's important to just bring things to you guys and let you guys say no, not our own thoughts say no. I think you have.
No. Just always say yes when we come and say, can we do this? Always say yes.
Yeah. Great.
Matt and Michelle, you both are incredible innovators, and just your heart is in the work of the Lord to bless these young adults. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, and we've learned from you. So
thank you. Thanks for the time.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you.
Bye.